Do we have too much government?
We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy and other Egan community television programming is supported by Thomson Reuters, makers of Westlaw Next and based in Egan. Through Westlaw Next and other innovative online services, Thomson Reuters is the world's leading source of intelligent information for businesses and professionals. Online at thomsonreuters.com. And by U.S. Federal Credit Union, the member-owned financial institution offering service, value, and experience you can trust to the greater Twin Cities community.
Welcome. We return with a different type of a show for Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Alan Miller, and we have two of our favorite longtime guests with us today, doing an appearance together before they take it and become a road show. Rick King.
Can I ask you a question?
Let me introduce you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. But
People might not know you, Judge.
You're doing what you do on oral arguments.
I know
That's
I do.
exactly
I
what
interrupted
he
you right
is.
away. I'm sorry, sir.
Rick King, the COO of Technology for Thomson Reuters, a man largely responsible for this studio and so much more. And the interrupter, retired Justice Paul Anderson of the Minnesota Supreme Court. And now you want to ask
Well,
me
did
something.
you voluntarily set this up with the two of us on the show? This is dangerous for you, you know.
There's nothing dangerous for me at my age.
Oh, there isn't.
No.
Okay, so you're doing this willingly, huh?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
What we're doing is we're trying to break in new hosts for the show. So both of you, this is considered a tryout.
Who's interviewing here?
And
It should be interesting for
We're
you,
all
Alan.
here together.
I think that's the message from Paul here. Is that
we hope that it's going to be interesting for everybody. And I want to ask particularly Rick, who's a member of the Metropolitan Airports Commission, how does a 9-year-old get on a plane with no certification, no anything?
I just want to say, first off, Alan, this proves our educational system in Minnesota is really well above average. To be able to teach a 9-year-old to do all the things that this 9-year-old did is just incredible. Actually, seriously, I have no earthly idea. I would have never guessed that anybody could pull that off, let alone what is obviously a very resourceful 9-year-old to go through casing it out the day before, going through getting
Very
on the
cleverly
plane,
getting a free meal.
food, going to the mall, whatever we turn out to find out the person did at the mall, car chases, stealing a car. I don't know what to say. If that was an adult, we'd say, boy, that's what a weird day. But a 9-year-old. So it turns out that
Let's give this kid a job.
I think it's Snowden-esque. You take the people that have the best skills to do something that they did it to you, and get them to help you protect yourself against those kind of things. The interesting thing that this broke during the weekend before we had a meeting and we were looking at what was going on, and the kid in the world of Delta, who's responsible for the person boarding, I think he just glommed onto a family and kind of went in with the family in the confusion of a multi-kid family boarding. But then back to TSA, there are ways to get through the airport security without a boarding pass, but you have to do some registration with your driver's license and all kinds of things. Kid didn't do that, so
He had nothing
how
except
you make it through those
ingenuity.
two steps onto the plane, it's nothing short of remarkable.
Now, I look at things legalistically. So what are the legal consequences for the kid? Are there any other legal consequences that fall out from this?
Well, I think that, obviously we're dealing with a minor, but there are some violations of a few rules, let alone the theft or whatever that he left ate and left. He did some other things, so there's clear violations of the law there. There's probably some violations with the parents, and then there's probably regulations broken that either some of the airline employees or some of the TSA employees failed to do a duty. I don't think that's a law-breaking thing.
I think some direction should be pointed at the parents here, because obviously there's a breakdown in parenting, a serious breakdown in parenting, and I think that they should start there. The fact that he was away for 2 days, the fact that they never reported him missing, this is just not right with a 9-year-old.
Yeah. And the thing is, he's 9 years old. He will not go into the juvenile justice system. You're 14 and above. He will be treated as a delinquent child, and as a child. And so it'll be very interesting. So the question is, what focus will be on the parents as this works through?
And I think we would all agree that the parents, there's obviously an absence of reasonable parenting here. And then what's going to happen, this is the bad part for every other parent in the world that's watching this. That 9-year-old has just tightened down travel for every single family in our country.
I saw it yesterday, and things are much tighter there. The barricades have changed. You can't slip under ropes anymore, things like that.
So it's just going to make it harder. And, traveling with a family is a challenge. And now it's just gotten harder for everybody because of this, which is too bad. A lot of the airlines are testing something that would definitely help this, and that's it's actually a self-service entry. It's like a gate that you go through. You have to put the boarding pass, and it scans, and it opens the gate when you have the boarding pass. There's no attendant to that unless you're there's some problem with your boarding pass.
That would be much the same as what we do here to get into the Thomson Reuters building.
Right. So we're going to see, I think, over years, the airlines are going to work to perfect that. And in this case, the kid probably wouldn't have been able to get through that barrier without, because it's not just like a little gate, it's like a glass door. So if it doesn't open, you can't go through.
Now, Judge Anderson, you retired from the Supreme Court in May.
Mm-hmm.
But you've been very busy since then.
Yeah.
Tell us what you're doing.
Well, first of all, I have 21 years of appellate practice law files that I have got to sort through. I have thrown away 7 big bins full of stuff that doesn't need to be confidential. It's just recycled. Probably 2 bins of confidential stuff. And I have 65 banker boxes in my garage with another 20 to come. That's, I mean, there's a lot of things that went on in those 21 years. But I've been doing many other things. I've just recently got done hosting a group of Kyrgyzstani judges who are coming here to study the rule of law and elections.
As you have done in several countries.
And I acted in a play at Landmark Center last weekend. This next Monday and Tuesday, I'm coordinating a conference on privacy in Williamsburg. By the way,
is there privacy?
Yes, there is privacy.
I thought it was all gone.
No, they're
out of our life.
With respect to court records. And the interesting thing is, this is where there's an intersection, is Heidi Sallow, one of your vice presidents and your head of the privacy with Thomson Reuters, she's going to be on the panel that I'm coordinating. And see, this is how the panel gets set up. Heidi goes first. You are out there providing and collecting information, and you're trying to determine the market, but also you're trying to determine what's private and what barriers you have. And she's going to talk about, I mean, probably 25 different country standards. Then we have someone who is you've seen the movie Runaway Jury, where they do all these profiles on jurors. We have one of those people coming. And then we have a judge and a court personnel that say, how do we deal with all this? And there is privacy, but the question is that how do we deal with it, and how do we make sure that people are protected but they still have access to information? But you're part of that, and so it's going to be fun. Heidi is just going to give us the overview, and we'll show some of that tension.
I think it'll be an interesting discussion, and it's one that we have on all areas of the spectrum here all the time.
And you deal with the technology, and the thing is that, I mean, the technology thing is a double-edged sword, isn't it? I mean, it really does help you collect the information, but now you got it there that you can push a button.
It's all there, for good or for bad, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's all there, and everything that makes it easier to use makes it easier to get, whether your intent is good or not.
That privacy is a little bit different than, when I hang up the phone, when I say so long to somebody these days, I say, and to all you guys at the NSA, this is, for you too.
Are you skeptical or are you cynical when you do that, Alan?
I am cynical.
You're cynical?
That's surprising to me. How about you?
And where is our privacy gone, though? If everything is stored.
I just got an email from a friend of mine, Gary Gandrud. He's the honorary Norwegian consul, and they have an annual Nordic American breakfast. He had breakfast with Vice President Mondale. And he was bringing up the fact in the context of this NSA privacy issue. And he said, well, Justice Anderson gave a speech on freedom at the Nordic American breakfast. He said, I don't know how many years ago. And we call it the Patriot Act speech, because at the time they just passed the Patriot Act. And everybody's saying how we need it. This was actually 2003.
So I was going to say it's 10 or 11 years
ago. Yeah, 10 years ago. And I, in that speech, was talking about, be careful. You have now opened a door, and you have given an imprimatur or authorization for things that you're not going to really like when you finally see how it plays out. Well, now we see what's happening.
And the Bill of Rights is crumbling as a result.
That's exactly what I said.
Is that right?
Yeah, I said it needs to meet something. So.
Well, just to take on a more provocative tone. So I don't care if anybody listens to all my phone calls or reads my emails.
No, because there's nothing there that you're worried about. It's the idea that somebody is intruding.
I don't care.
Doesn't bother you?
That doesn't bother me. I don't want, and I'm pretty serious about that. There's obviously some calls that, would break some laws, if there was a merger and acquisition discussion, things like that would be a concern. So I'm generalizing a little bit, but what I don't want to have happen for myself is when they obtain your personal information, then they can apply for a car loan on your credit, disrupt your credit. That's where we start getting to evil. I don't worry about the other stuff quite so much. I may be way out there compared to others.
I just got something yesterday in the mail that said, photostat the front and back of every credit card that you have, including your library card, because thieves are now so sophisticated that they are utilizing all of these things to create new identities, and until you actually do a search to find out, you may never know that somebody else is out there.
I'm going to disagree with gentleman here a little bit. And is that in this play that I was in recently, I was Attorney General Philander King, Teddy Roosevelt's trust-busting Attorney General. And he was talking about the concentration of power in the railroads. And in 1904, he quoted, and he said, as Lord Acton said in his recently published open letter to Bishop Creighton, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And see, that's the thing it is information is power. And the question becomes now, you monitor all this information, you tap your phone, what's the repository for it? And who has access to that information now becomes very powerful.
They're actually building a new repository in Utah.
Yes.
It's going to be a huge facility.
And
where
so,
they're keeping all of this.
Information in our society, this is
absolutely.
power. It's absolutely power.
No.
And so how do we keep that information, access to that information?
And how do you vet your
corrupting
employees?
Those who have control of it.
How do you vet your employees so that you don't have another Snowden in there who obviously was not vetted properly, as even today's paper says, warnings as far back as 2009 that he should be watched and couldn't be trusted, and yet he went and got a job with the CIA and then the NSA. I mean, how far does it go?
This
How-
brings in a lot of interesting cyclical things because, generally the government hires contractors to do the clearances, and they go and use records databases that are gleaned from the stuff we're just talking about.
And you're a source for that.
We are a source for that.
Yeah.
And then today, moreover, they're starting to collect, this would be the legitimate public available, not the private stuff, but the blog posts that people make, the Twitter feeds they send out, anything they're writing online as part of their profile and their clearance. So if the FBI came to visit you for the clearance, which is usually part of it, and they interview some relatives, they're going to know everything that you've written on the web, everything that you've ever tweeted or responded to, your Facebook page, all the things you've said. And it's quite interesting because if we say we want them vetted better, then we've got to allow them to do this, so somebody's got to have the information. If we don't want to make the information public, then we can't vet them.
Or you don't make it public yourself.
That's the individual choice, right?
My wife Sharon won't use her cell phone. I don't think she's used it once in the last 4 years, maybe, when she got a flat tire. She's online, email. We're all online email, but she won't go to Facebook. She won't go to Twitter. I'm on Facebook. I don't know why, but I haven't Twittered. And I don't make entries on Facebook except when I'm hysterical about something that the right wing did. Like
So
shutting
you're
down the
making
country.
a lot of them, aren't you?
Like shutting down the country
Yeah.
and creating havoc over the debt limit and things like that.
Here's one of the things that I've been involved in this privacy conference, whatever, and is that you become very much aware is the government's ability to deal with privacy issues and that is always behind the curve, because folks like you are always developing new things, and it's always a game of catch-up.
Right.
And
The thieves are always ahead of
oh
the
yeah,
legitimate
I mean,
people.
Yeah, I think the thieves are ahead of us, and we're ahead of the government.
yeah, that's
So
probably.
that's
It's,
the way it goes, and it's very interesting.
And we just got to keep
You keep
running.
going.
We gotta keep
It's a
going.
race.
It's a race.
It's a race without a finish line, really.
Well,
yeah, exactly.
40 years from now, I won't be around to see it. We'll probably all be underwater, or at least where my children are living on Long Island will no longer be an island.
Or is this how you bring up climate change as a topic?
And who knows where we're going.
But we've been here,
it
all of
is
us have been here
frightening.
30, 40 years, and the incredible, I mean, if you asked me 40 years that I would have this powerful computer on my
Right.
hip, and I'm in touch every place I go, I would say, I mean, that's Dick Tracy stuff, you know?
It is. Well, there's more computing processing power in that device that you carry there than in the space equipment that landed a person on the moon.
Yeah, it's
So when you
That's
think
a pretty scary
when you
thought.
think about that, that's just absolutely amazing. And we were doing some discussion about cloud computing at a venture conference a few days back, and we were talking about just our business here. We have currently 18 petabytes of information, and
okay, a
a petabyte.
I mean, okay, I'm up to gigabytes, okay?
Okay, so gigabyte, then you're going to terabytes,
Yeah, oh, I meant terabytes, I got that
and
one.
then we go to petabytes.
Petabytes.
So
Wow.
just to contextually, 1 petabyte is the equivalent of every written book in every language in the world. 1 petabyte. So that facility that you just mentioned in Utah, which is a big new data center that they're still trying to bring online, which is kind of funny because they keep blowing out electrical circuits as they're bringing it online. But compared to what we store in terms of data, that's going to get into the next level, which is exabytes, which is 1,000 petabytes.
Oh my God.
And we just talk about amazing amounts.
It's
So
beyond comprehension. It really is.
to bring it to earth a little bit, because it's really hard, the petabyte is 255,000 DVDs. So that's a movie DVD. 255,000. That's the kind of information
And
storage.
anybody that buys a laptop computer or whatever realizes how much space a DVD takes. I mean,
Right.
you put extra storage. So it's
55,000 of those. Yeah, so there's a massive amount of information. It's not all personal information. It's a massive amount of information.
When will these machines start out thinking us?
Well, they've already got speed in their favor, right?
Yeah.
So in that regard, and we've got machines that do more learning, so they can be trained to get better. And you saw that with the IBM machine. His name escapes me.
Yeah.
That with the TV show, they can start to recognize things a little bit better. I believe personally, there's always some reasoning capability in putting all these pieces together that the computer perhaps won't be able to do as we would envision it today. Bringing the speed is their biggest asset. So what a computer is doing is going through millions and millions of choices faster than we can, eliminating choices that we would not even consider because they're not relevant. So our ability to pull relevancy out is much better. But they're faster, so they can eliminate the alternative through a process much faster.
If
So
they learn to use weapons, computers will be dangerous.
yeah, so
Well, this is an example. Okay, so now I am no longer have staff at the court, so I have to, figure out how I'm going to exist in this world with no help. I mean, I got a Mac Air, which I really love, but I got this program, Dragon, which is dictation, and I made a presentation honoring the posthumously Ambassador Stevens yesterday. His mother and stepfather were here, and I wanted to get the speech right, and so I decided I'm going to dictate it. So I'm in the office and I'm dictating this speech, and there it is. I told one of my former clerks, I said, I hate to do the original first draft. I love to edit. I said, hey, but Dragon's making you obsolete now.
how accurate did you find it when you were doing that speech?
Quite accurate.
It's gotten better and better. I mean, that will completely improve. The voice recognition is going to completely improve, and it's going to take, keyboards will become obsolete, really.
Yeah.
And all, people have in their car, a lot of cars take voice commands today, change the radio station, dial somebody, do things like that. That will become more and more accurate to the point where I think we'll probably see things like carpal tunnel will disappear because you won't have to.
I have one of those voice commands in my car now. It's called the Sharon machine.
Yeah.
It says,
But
you're over the line.
But
You're exceeding the speed limit. Look where you're going.
Yeah, I have one of those too. But this strikes me. I mean, it showed on that line there that you supervise thousands of employees, and I think you're in over 60 countries.
Yeah.
And I've always viewed West, Thomson Reuters, as a gem with the number of good jobs you have down here in Egan and good paying jobs, whatever. With this new technology, I mean, are you going to be just cutting your workforce because the machines will be taking over for them?
Well, what generally is happening, so the outside world has competition on whatever you're doing, so different people are ratcheting up what you need to do, so you have to do more and more. More of the base level stuff, the rote things, get done by the machines. So think of it as the bottom end being taken over by the machines. The top end has to expand to be more competitive. So what you find are the workers doing more and more of the top level thinking part of it. The people that are really successful vastly expand that top end. So what you're trading is, and it does call for education.
Yeah.
I was
You're
gonna
trading
say,
the
you
bottom
need
end
the
jobs.
best educated people.
Right. You're
to be
trading the
that one
bottom
step
end
ahead.
jobs for automation, and you're expanding the top end jobs that require huge commitments to education. And so when we talk about the gap today, there's people talk about the income gap and all that. There's good statistics about the gains over time. I'm actually more worried about the skill gap. I'm worried that the more this expands, the more we draw, and force people to be more educated. If we don't do something about the group here and moving them up, we're really going to create a huge distance.
Well, 30, 40 years ago, we were number one coming out of World War II. There was no question about it. Today, this country is where? 12th or 14th in terms of skills and the skill gap? And that's a pretty frightening thought in and of itself. We're losing our prominence in terms of not only because of our legislators, but because of the fact that we're not educating.
Now you struck an important nerve with me, and I bothered it, is that we have this expanding, and it's shown between the rich and the poor. And the way we, I'm going to, one point is that, Jefferson said, the pursuit of happiness is providing the maximum opportunity for the maximum number of people to achieve happiness. What you're telling us right now is that for the future of this country, a lot of people will not be able to achieve happiness. They won't have that opportunity unless we really put a lot of emphasis in education.
I'm saying that completely. I believe that. The way to fix the wage gap is education.
Do we have the commitment as a country to do that?
I frankly don't see it like I'd like to see it. So I'd have to say, could we, would we, if we agree that that's it? I think we would. I mean, I think it's the equivalent of a man on the moon by the end of the decade kind of commitment. We may not know how we need to do it, but we have to acknowledge that for us to be a leader in the world, this is a big deal to our society.
But we have a large element of our society right now, primarily the oligarchs, who will not acknowledge that. We are suffering from really greed that's avaricious right now. The people who have more than they can ever possibly utilize for them, their families, their future, want more. And that's what's driving us into this two-class society. And other countries have free education. We don't. Other countries, most of them, have some form of single-payer health care. We don't. And we have people who are opposing it the same way as the debt limit has been really in the news this last couple of weeks and things like that. That's where we're failing here. How can we change the mindset of people to get them to think like Bill Gates and not like the Koch brothers?
Yeah, it would be interesting, because I think if I was going to go to the kind of the Gates example, if we can take, if we try to solve this together and not sort of paint into these two corners that are going to oppose, I'd like to try to get the people with that kind of money to help to mobilize around a mission to educate more people, help educate people. People need to be healthy and they need to be educated. Otherwise, we're going to have.
So health is a fundamental right as much as education too?
Well, I don't know if you don't have a right to be healthy, but you have a hope that you will be healthy.
Or the government should provide you with the opportunity to be healthy.
I think there should be some opportunities to be healthy.
You see, that's very interesting. You can't guarantee it.
Other nations have recognized that.
But you need to provide the opportunity for the maximum number of people to be healthy.
I think that's true. So it's always tough when we talk about rights versus opportunity.
I threw that one in. I knew you were going to come right back at me, but it's kind of fun. And you did exactly what you should. It's not a right, but it's the obligation for some opportunity.
Well, I mean, so if we don't do that, a greater and greater group of people will be disenfranchised and unable to participate in the economy as we have it, either due to health or lack of education, or both.
And what does that lead to?
Well, eventually that's going to be a majority. And then you wonder what the majority does, because an uninformed electorate that's dissatisfied with the way things are going.
We see what's happening in countries
can
like
lead
Egypt
to a lot of
and Syria and places like that. It leads to riot. It leads to revolution. And we've been there. We've done that. I would hope that we
Now you've come back to the title of your show, right?
Access to democracy.
Access to democracy.
Absolutely.
We all love our democracy and the rule of law, whatever. And you have just described a potential threat
Mhm.
to our democratic form of government is a isolation, not a disenfranchisement, but a creating an ignorant, lower, unfulfilled class in society that will make decisions. And
Yeah, and you know, they can do, a majority can do that within the law for change if they participate. But if they're so disenfranchised, then I think they go more what Alan's talking about. You don't do it within the law, but you take your larger
Look
number.
at the cities like Detroit and the crime statistics in these cities where a great number of the people are disenfranchised. What happens? They see what the others have, they want what the others have, and then they take steps to get what the others have. And sometimes those are very violent steps. And that's what I really see as a threat to our access to democracy, to the way of life that we know it. And, you know, having been born before World War II, this change really frightens me. 1955, Eisenhower said, "Beware of the industrial..."
few
Whatever.
people realize he started saying that as early as he did.
Complex. What was it? The serious and something industrial complex.
Right.
And that's what's happening now. Corporations, as we are told, are individuals. Yet I haven't seen one give birth to a baby. But corporations are not individuals, and there has to be some rule of law, some structure, so that we can get back on the path that we were on. I saw an interesting film yesterday about Rosie the Riveter, and the fact that when we had to, we mobilized. We stopped producing cars and started producing tanks within days. Men went to war. Women went into building ships. There's a ship that they built in 4 days.
Now you loop back to something that you were talking about, is that we know what the need is, but you were not so sure about whether the will is there to accomplish it. And the question now becomes, is that how are we going to energize?
How do we mobilize the will?
How do we mobilize the will? And I don't have but I want to loop back here to make sure we understand. We're not just talking race and culture here. I think one of the threatened groups in society is the working class Caucasian male.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at the polling, is that is one of the most disenchanted groups in society. And this Great Recession didn't help because, you know, so many of the working class Caucasian males were the ones that got caught up in this Great Recession. And so their traditional role of being the breadwinner, bringing home money, they were basically neutered on that. And so where did the health care come? Where was the income coming? It's from the wife.
And their self-esteem is destroyed.
Their self-esteem is destroyed. And we need to address that. We need to make sure we don't ignore, you know, across the board in groups like that.
Right.
And it's a challenge.
I really think you're right. And the condition that I was describing knows no race, color, creed, or religious affiliation.
No.
There may be at any time more of one group than another in it, but it will fluctuate, and it's going to build, and that's the problem, not a particular group, but that problem.
Oh, I almost hit you there. I said, okay, sir, Thomson Reuters, do your best, okay? Do your part. Make a change, you know.
You know, I think if it was up to Rick King, Thomson Reuters would. He is not the only voice of Thomson Reuters.
But you do a good job.
He does.
But so what would you do if you were, if you could make things happen? I would try to change a dialogue on this, because I think, it's not just that these people make a lot of money and these people don't. It's I want the people who have the money to put the money, to preserve their money, actually. They need to put money into education for the other people. There's a preservation, self-preservation interest that hasn't been activated.
And I think, as the judge said, it all starts with education.
And I quite frankly would put more emphasis on public education. I got to confess, I was never really a big fan of the charter schools, because I said they will work in a boutique fashion early on, but the system will become diluted, even corrupted, and it will not solve the problem.
And the same thing goes, as far as I am concerned, with for-profit higher education. I don't see, and I think statistics are starting to bear it out, that people who go to these online for-profit universities are getting the education or even the training that they need for their particular whatever it is that they chose.
So, in my way of thinking, it would, if I could get the Koch brothers, for example, and just say, do you see this problem? And let's say they said yes, and okay, we're going to do this. I would start the conduit of giving money to public education from them. Not, I would not, traditionally we think public education gets funded from public resources. The private people donate to private universities or whatever. I don't care about that. It doesn't need to be the Koch brothers, a private school, that is what they believe.
I would just do lobotomies on the Koch brothers.
I want them to be leaders of getting people that are their associates with the money they have on our side to fix this, because of an enlightened self-interest.
They have given tens, perhaps hundreds of millions of dollars to certain charities. Lincoln Center, as long as their name is on it, $60 million here, et cetera, there. But then to some right-wing organization like the Heritage Foundation or one of those, they will do an equal job, which really steps on the throats of the middle class.
I'm going to follow up on my suggestion. It's going to be a little radical. I'm going to get everybody irritated with me. Is that, see, I have no problem with teachers and unions being unionized, but they got to change. Albert Shanker talked about this in the thing I was in the mid-'80s. They got to understand is that they have to have accountability within their own core. And you're starting to see it emerge and saying, there are some people in the teaching profession that just, they realize that they're not doing a good job. And we have to have a means by which you have that self-enforcement. Second,
I don't have a problem with that.
Second, I would probably take the unions out of the principal level. I mean, is that I have observed over the period of time, probably the most key official in the school system is the principal that runs that school. And I'm not sure that, there's some principals, too many principals that want to get out of teaching. And
too many principals without principles. That's what you're saying.
Maybe that is. But I would really beef up that part of the school. And
I agree with you on that.
And demand more accountability at that level.
Right.
And a principal that's not only going to support what they think is right in the school, but are going to keep some of the parents at bay who actually in many ways get in the way of education and dysfunction, because too many parents throw too many of the problems onto the school.
Can you imagine if the principals acted more like the head football coach at the same school? They basically tell the parents to buzz off a lot. They run the thing seriously. We need to empower them. Principal was the abbreviation for the title. Principal teacher was how they got their title, right? So they need to be involved in setting the education. And I think, frankly, we could lighten up the central district staff by an unbelievable amount. The money needs to go to the schools.
For education,
maybe
not
you need
for
some
administration.
roll-up, but very little roll-up. They don't need that much to be rolled up. They need the money in the school. The principal knows the school, and they should drive the school to be better. And if they don't, you fire them.
Now I'm going to throw one other radical thing out there. I'd take the athletics out of the school.
Okay.
I do the European model. I believe in athletics. I believe what it is, but I would structure it like they do more of the European structure, the club structure. You have, I mean, each town, each community or subset, has their club. They have their teams. And it's as competitive. Believe me, I've been in Norway, other places. And the kids, it's a robust system. But they take it out of the schools so that you don't have athletics driving so much related to education.
And we see it even here, where high schools are taking student athletes from areas where they don't live to build their teams. And certain high schools have the same teams that win every year, simply because they take from all
I think he's talking about where we live, isn't he?
No, he's talking about this. See, this has been going on a long time. When I'm 70. I just had to retire. We always knew that Austin would field a very good basketball team because Hormel was in Austin, and they saw some kid in a surrounding town, and he was a really good athlete. The dad wound up getting a job at Hormel. And we digress a little bit. We're not going to solve all these problems.
One other thing that I would certainly do, I believe really, really strenuously in the separation of church and state. And I think that has broken down completely. And I think that religion has intruded into government to a detrimental effect. And we see it on a federal level. I think we see it on a local level.
Do you think there's more now than there used to be 20 years ago?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because we used to say a prayer every morning.
I remember Father Coughlin in the 40s who ranted, people like that. We've always had those. But for instance, I would take under God out of the Pledge of Allegiance. I think that disenfranchises a large segment of society that's getting larger. And we see it in terms of memberships of religious organizations. But I don't think they should be in government.
You know how under God got into the Pledge of Allegiance?
It got in the 50s.
In the 50s.
Yes.
Senator out of Michigan. I mean, and in the 50s, we were fighting this atheistic system of communism, Marxism, whatever. And so it was put into our Pledge of Allegiance as a weapon.
Our overreaction, the same as the Patriot Act, was an overreaction. And we seem to have a tendency to do that and repeat it over and over again.
When did it show up in the currency?
Civil War.
Civil War?
Civil War.
Yeah.
I mean, no, and again, I mean, it was a matter of principle. It was when the Civil War changed to the anti-slavery. I mean, it started on that, but it was basically economics that was driving it. But in order to win the war, Lincoln knew he had to make it about slavery. And how do we make it such that we are on the side of natural law?
In God we trust.
In God we trust.
Yeah.
And it was to contrast us with the South.
See, Mel Brooks had the answer with the 2,000-year-old man, because they asked, well, who did you worship? And he said, we worshiped Phil. Well, why did you worship Phil? He said, because he was bigger than the rest of us and he could beat the hell out of us. Then one day, Phil got struck by lightning and killed. And we said, oh, maybe we should be on another track.
No, we're getting too deep in things. But what I will come back to is an experience I had a year ago when I was in Tunisia and Libya. But this was at Tunisia. And I was sitting at a conference. I was symposium. I'm one of the speakers. I have a very learned Muslim law professor next to me. He knew as much about the U.S. Constitution as most American scholars. A young woman who was a member of the Constituent Assembly who was Islamic and worried about. And the Constitution we're doing starts out with is that we are an Islamic nation. And then we got somebody talking about Sharia law. And I mean, it's one of those epiphanies, thinking, oh my heavens, I understand the problems that they face. Because when you start out saying we are an Islamic nation and tie religion so closely, that means that everything that's a sin in religion needs to be against the law.
Mm-hmm.
And in
you
our
see it
country,
being acted out in some countries, headscarves in France, for instance.
And so the magnificence of our Constitution was, I mean, God is not mentioned in our Constitution, but we are. And see, this is part of the tension in the schools. Despite the fact that God is not in our Constitution, we are one of the most religious countries in the world. And
this is one of the most religious states in the country.
But what the Constitution does is it allows everybody to search for God. And we're not telling you who God is. You can do that search yourself and come to that conclusion, and then worship as you see fit.
It might be Phil.
Yeah, well, yeah, crazy. But, I mean, in that it might be Phil thing is we even allow people to search and not find God.
Absolutely.
And that allows us to separate what you would find sinful in religion.
That really
and what
has
we
crept into politics to a
put into
frightening
law.
degree.
Yep.
As I listen to some of our legislators saying what Christ would do and quoting Christ, well, you know, if you look at the Old Testament, I don't necessarily want to live like that. I don't want to stone people to death, things like that. And I just think that has no place in our governmental structure.
Well, this is why I go back. I'm a big fan of our founders. They got that.
They did.
They understood it.
They escaped from what that was.
Well, but also they understood that this country was founded by people escaping from religious oppression. And what did they do when they got here? They oppressed people religiously. The Puritans were horrible to the Quakers, you know. And so they were drawing on that experience. I thoroughly digress.
And all of us took this land away from the Native Americans. And even today, we have reneged on treaties where most of them in the Dakotas, for instance, live in substandard living conditions. We fall off the wagon too many times.
We're human, you know.
People don't have memory of history. People don't know history, and that's why we repeat it.
So now I'm going to come back, and it's a solution. I was privileged yesterday to be part of this award ceremony for Ambassador Stevens. You know, he's the American diplomat that was killed in Benghazi, and I lamented the fact that people are making politics of it. But in giving the award yesterday, I said how fitting and right it is to do it, because Stevens was a legitimate American hero. And we need to search for and recognize heroes because they provide us with vision, insight, passion, and principles such that we can be guided. And one of the other things that we're looking at, I'd say look for some of our heroes.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
and not some of these ideologues that drive us into
We
partisan.
can find them every place. I mean, George Washington legitimately should be a hero, flawed as he was in so many ways, but you know, he turned down being king twice. And what caused him to do that? I mean, what vision, what kind of leadership? So we should look for people who can inspire us.
What we have to do also is get back to teaching the social sciences as well as the technology. And I can see from my own experience that we are failing in the social sciences. We are failing. We're not teaching humanities the way we should. We're not teaching history the way we should. The way it was drummed into me in school. They just don't get that today.
I got a question for you in the same context of what Alan's saying, but it's in your workplace and my workplace. Alan's saying is that we got to, just not the techniques, technology in schools. Mm-hmm. Our court system is becoming very technologically savvy, e-filing, e-charging, whatever. And I've been privy to any number of meetings and sessions where people are selling this as like it's the best thing since sliced bread. Now, it's something we need to do, and we need to do it to keep up. But I say is that it's not going to guarantee that we're, as judges, are going to be better. And it's not going to be a guarantee that our end product is better. It's that human factor that, so when you say teach civics, we got to teach our judges and all our employees that is to know what is justice, what is doing the right thing, how do we make the system work. And my question for you is, do you face that same challenge in your business at Thomson Reuters?
I think we do. I think people have, so full disclosure, I used to teach science, math and computer science right? So, but I think the best people that we can hire have well-rounded backgrounds. They bring the ability to look at a problem from all angles. So I think if you dominate too much of any one thing, you get solutions that come out of one corner or one set of points on the compass. And our best thinkers use both sides of their brain and can approach a problem from different angles to look at things nicely. So I think we should get back to a more rigorous education, but a broad one, not just focus on technology. That being said, everything uses technology these days, all disciplines. And I don't think we can avoid having people trained in that. They should have a basis of that. Not knowing something about that means you're going to become the slave to it.
But not disproportionately.
No, I think a broad education is best. I'll give you an example of what I would want to combat. I think if you're a doctor, for example, that's a highly scientific and a very difficult road to go educationally. You've got a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of science associated with that. It's very competitive. I think we fail to bring in the human aspects of the training, and then we wonder why we have some of the best clinicians who don't have a bedside manner. I think it's all about how we went about educating them. Now, I don't think we should loosen up the rigorous science side of that, but we should certainly bring in some other components.
It's like a friend of mine said, you do all this training for a medical field, then you open up the door at the end and say, serve humanity, but the whole educational process is devoid of any.
All you did was have scientific training. Then go the other realm. There's a third grade teacher. This is just one example, but it's true. Person I know went to school wanted to be an elementary school teacher. Very fine teacher, very strong teacher of writing and reading, very strong. I couldn't say enough about how good she is at that. When you ask her about her course selection during university, she did anything to avoid math and science courses. Now, in one way you go, well, the focus is on the right thing, but then you have third graders in a classroom with a teacher who's going to avoid at all costs some of the subject areas that are going to be essential to these people knowing, and that's a formative age for that group. So by the same token, the doctors need to have the human side brought in. You've got this third grade class where you need to bring the scientific side in.
And maybe the teacher should specialize, and maybe she should not be teaching science and math. It's somebody else who
But I'm going
knows
to
it.
give you a solution, and it comes from Steve Jobs. He bought the company Pixar when it wasn't doing very well, and he thought he could do something with it. And he bought this new campus that had a number of different buildings around it, and he had basically three aspects to his corporation: the imaginative, innovative types, the technological people, and the administrative people. And they came to him with the design that said, well, we'll have the administration here, the technology here, and the imaginative people here. And he threw it out, and he built a building that caused all three groups to have to interact. I think it's conciliancy, or is that the term they use, is that they have to interact with each other so that they can exchange each other and see. So for that teacher who's very good, I would design a program where she has to interact with science and technology.
I agree, and I think you can do it through specialties and team teaching. There's solutions to be had. The bottom line is we should not have the medical community graduating without humanities sides, and we should not have that third grade classroom without having some scientific discovery.
And when you walk out with a philosophy degree, that doesn't mean that you should be devoid of anything else.
Right.
Because we need philosophers.
So where do we find the force that's going to make some of this happen?
We've got to make people listen to us.
What?
And they're not interested in listening to us.
Well, I think I would love to see our leadership in our world, our country, focus a lot less on these things that we seem to focus on and try to mobilize. I go back to the Kennedy man on the moon by the end of the decade. We need to have some more big things that people sort of take the leadership from the president or the people with the bully pulpit draw the business in, draw the nonprofit. You know, let's have a dialogue about, isn't this a big issue for us, and let's go. Now, maybe I'm too idealistic, and then you have to regress to, well, I'm going to do whatever I can about it in my world. But it's like, then you feel like, well, that's just the drop in the bucket.
Now, I have a recent example, and this may be just a little bit scary also, but I'm Presbyterian, and I'll give that disclosure, but I kind of like this new pope. And he said, well, as a church, we need to stop focusing on these distracting, divisive issues. And what he was talking about were some of the main issues that the Catholic Church has been, I mean, this is gay marriage and abortion and whatever. And he's saying we need to refocus. It was just, you could have knocked me over with a feather when you had the Pope saying, but maybe here's somebody who...
He's really a breath of fresh air.
But he's realizing, you say, is that we need to figure out, focus on what's most important.
And maybe these other things, maybe it is true that 20% of what we have, we vehemently disagree with. Maybe 20 is wrong. But isn't there another group that we actually all agree that this needs to be fixed? We don't focus on that as a collective.
I'm going to have to cut in here and say, because we have actually used up our hour.
An hour already?
I have been doing this program for 15 years now. I can't think of a more meaningful and more significant show that we have done during that time than the one that we just completed. I would love to do this again and again if the two of you would make yourselves available.
I was surprised.
Were
you surprised the directions of the conversation?
Rick King, Paul Anderson.
You never know.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really. Thank you, Alan. Great to see you.